Have you ever noticed how, as you get older, the world seems to grow louder, but all you want is quiet? Conversations that used to feel engaging now feel exhausting. Social gatherings that once brought excitement now leave you drained. It's not that you become bitter or antisocial. It's just that something inside you has shifted. I'm 65 now, and I avoid people. Not because I dislike them, but because I've come to value my own peace more than I ever did before. You don't realize in your younger years, but time, real precious time, isn't measured by clocks. It's measured by energy. And one day, I woke up and realized that most of mine was being spent on things that didn't matter. For most of my life, I was the person who said yes. Yes to family gatherings I didn't enjoy. Yes to friendships that had long since run their course. Yes to phone calls that felt more like obligations and conversations. I used to believe that maintaining relationships, any relationships, was a measure of a meaningful life. That staying connected, no matter how exhausting, was simply the right thing to do. But then something changed. I remember the exact moment I realized I had been giving too much of myself away. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was at a dinner party, a small gathering of people I had known for years. The food was good, the conversation was flowing, and yet I felt empty. I looked around the table, watching people talk over each other, complaining about the same things they always did, rehashing the same tired stories. No one was really listening. No one was really present. And in that moment, I felt something inside me whisper, "Why are you here?" That was the beginning of my shift. At first, I resisted it. I told myself I was just tired, that maybe I was going through a phase. But the feeling didn't go away. I started to notice how certain interactions left me feeling depleted, how some friendships had become nothing more than habit. I saw how often I forced myself to engage in conversations that didn't nourish me, how many times I smiled and nodded while my mind was somewhere else entirely. So I started making changes, small ones at first. I stopped answering phone calls from people who only reached out when they needed something. I declined invitations that didn't excite me. I let go of friendships that had become one-sided, where I was always the giver and never the receiver. And I replaced those things with moments that actually brought me joy. Mornings became mine again. Instead of waking up to a list of obligations, I sat outside with my coffee, listening to the birds, watching the sun rise slowly over the trees. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since my 30s. I went on long walks without telling anyone where I was going, just enjoying the feeling of moving through the world without being expected anywhere. I rediscovered the pleasure of reading, not just skimming, but truly getting lost in a book, the kind that makes you forget where you are. For the first time in years, I felt free, but not everyone understood. Some friends took it personally. "You've changed," they'd say, their voices laced with something that felt like accusation. "You never call anymore." Others would joke, "What? Are you becoming a hermit now?" My sister even asked me once, with genuine concern, "Are you depressed?" And the truth is, I wasn't. In fact, I had never felt lighter. But how do you explain to people that solitude isn't loneliness? That choosing peace isn't the same as shutting yourself away? That some of us, after a lifetime of putting everyone else first, just want to breathe for a while? Family was harder. My kids started to notice. My daughter called me one afternoon, a little hesitant, and said, "Mom, I feel like you don't need us as much anymore." That one hit me, because of course I needed them. I love them more than anything, but I also needed me. And for the first time in my life, I was learning how to prioritize that. I reassured her that nothing had changed between us, that I would always be there when she needed me. But deep down, I also knew something had shifted. I was no longer willing to give up my own peace just to make everyone else comfortable. You see, we grow up believing that relationships are like a garden. We're supposed to water every single plant, tend every single flower. But the truth is, some plant are weeds. Some take more from the soil than they give. And if you spend too much time tending to everything, you end up losing the things that actually matter. So I started treating my life differently. I became selective. I chose depth over obligation. I chose peace over presence. And in doing so, I found something I never expected: clarity. I wasn't disappearing. I was reappearing. Something shifts when you stop filling your days with noise. At first, it feels strange, almost unsettling, like you're standing in an empty house that used to be full of people. But then, after a while, you realize that the quiet isn't empty at all. It's full of things you never noticed before. The sound of your own thoughts, the weight of your own presence, the realization that maybe, for the first time in a long time, you're finally hearing yourself. After I started saying no more often, after I let go of the conversations that drained me, something unexpected happened. I didn't just gain time, I gained clarity. I started to see my life in a way I never had before. There was a friend I had known for years, decades, actually. We had been through so much together, from raising kids to struggling through tough financial times. But something had changed. It was subtle at first. Our conversations became less about sharing and more about unloading. Every phone call felt like a list of grievances, complaints about people, about work, about life. I'd hang up the phone feeling like I had just run a marathon with a backpack full of bricks. I kept telling myself it was just a phase, that maybe she was going through a hard time. But the more I paid attention, the more I realized it was always like this. I had just never let myself acknowledge it. And that's when it hit me. I had spent years nurturing relationships simply because they had existed for a long time, not because they made me happy, not because they enriched my life, just because it felt wrong to let them go. Have you ever done that? Kept something in your life just because you thought you were supposed to? I wrestled with that guilt for a while. But the more time I spent alone, the more I understood something powerful. Letting go of a relationship doesn't mean you don't care about the person. It just means you care about yourself, too. Once I embraced that, everything started to change. Without those exhausting interactions, I had more energy. I started waking up feeling lighter. The days stretched out before me, no longer filled with obligations I had never actually wanted. I found myself gravitating toward the things I had abandoned years ago. Small things at first. Sitting outside in the morning with my coffee instead of scrolling through messages. Cooking meals just for me, exactly the way I liked them, without worrying about anyone else's preferences. Then it became bigger things. I picked up a paintbrush again for the first time in years, just to see if I still could. I spent whole afternoons in the garden, getting lost in the simple joy of working with my hands. I found peace in the act of creation, in doing things for no other reason than they made me happy. And that was when I realized something profound. I had spent so much of my life defining myself by my relationships, by my role as a friend, a mother, a partner, a caretaker. But who was I when no one else was around? Who was I when I wasn't fulfilling a role? When I wasn't performing for anyone else? That question scared me at first, because for a long time, I didn't have an answer. But as the days passed, I started to find one. I was someone who loved the stillness of early mornings. Someone who found comfort in the rhythmic motions of baking bread from scratch. Someone who could sit for hours with a book, not needing anything or anyone else to make the moment feel whole. And the more I leaned into that, the more I realized I didn't need to be needed to feel valuable. I didn't need a packed social calendar to feel relevant. I was enough just as I was. I won't lie and say it was easy. There were moments of doubt, moments where I questioned if I was isolating myself too much. But then I would step outside, feel the warmth of the sun on my face, hear the wind moving through the trees, and I'd remember I chose this. I built this peace with my own two hands. And maybe, just maybe, this was the life I was always meant to have. There's a quiet kind of freedom that comes when you stop chasing things that were never meant for you, when you stop holding on to relationships out of habit, when you stop worrying about how others see your choices. At first, that freedom feels unfamiliar, like stepping into a house you used to live in but haven't visited in years. But then after a while, you realize something, the space, the stillness, it's yours. And it always has been. After I let go of the obligations that drained me, something interesting happened. It wasn't just that I had more time. It was that I finally had room to breathe, room to think, room to simply be. And in that space, I started noticing things I had overlooked for years. The way the afternoon sun shifts through the trees. The way the steam curls from a cup of tea on a cool morning. The simple pleasure of warm socks fresh from the dryer. I used to think happiness was something big, something you had to chase down and work for. I spent years believing it lived in milestones and achievements, in full calendars and busy schedules. But I was wrong. Happiness isn't waiting at the end of some long road. It's already here, in the smallest, quietest moments. Have you ever felt that? That sudden realization that joy isn't as complicated as we make it out to be? One morning, not long after I started embracing this new way of living, I woke up to the sound of rain tapping against the window. The old me would have sighed, thinking of all the things I should be doing. But instead, I made a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and just listened. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to fill the silence with anything. I just let it be. And that's when I realized this was a life I had been running toward all along. A life where I didn't have to prove anything, where I didn't have to keep up, where simply existing was enough. It's funny how we spend so much time fearing stillness. We convince ourselves that if we slow down, if we step back, we'll be forgotten, that we'll disappear. But the truth is, you don't lose yourself in the quiet. You find yourself there. Of course, not everyone understood the changes I was making. But instead of trying to explain myself, I simply allowed my happiness to speak for itself. The more I let go, the lighter I felt. And the lighter I felt, the clearer everything became. I realized I didn't miss the things I had left behind. The forced conversations, the endless obligations, the need to be everything to everyone. What I had now was something far more valuable: peace. And peace, I've learned, is worth everything. There's something almost magical about reaching a stage in life where your time truly belongs to you. No more forcing yourself into plans that drain you. No more filling empty spaces with people who don't add anything meaningful. Just the freedom to live on your own terms. At first, I wasn't sure what that meant. Letting go of old routines, stepping away from the relationships that no longer fit. It felt unfamiliar. But the more space I created in my life, the more I understood something I had overlooked for years. The things I thought I needed weren't the things that actually brought me happiness. Mornings, once rushed with obligations, became slow and deliberate. I started waking up earlier, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. There was something deeply satisfying about watching the sky change colors, about sipping coffee in complete silence. In the past, I would have reached for my phone, checked messages, maybe responded to someone who expected a reply. Now, I just sit, I listen, I breathe, and I feel more present than I ever did before. The biggest shift wasn't just in how I spent my time. It was in how I felt about it. I remember an afternoon, not too long ago, the kind of day that used to feel like an obligation. Sunday, the day of check-ins and calls, the day to be available. But instead of answering my phone, instead of filling my day with conversations that left me drained, I did something different. I went for a walk. Alone. No destination in mind. No need to be anywhere. Just the simple joy of moving, of being outside, of feeling the wind against my skin. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything. Because that's the thing. When you stop filling your time with things that don't serve you, you don't feel a void. You feel relief. You feel lighter. And in that lightness, you start to see what actually matters. It wasn't that I stopped caring about people. If anything, I started appreciating real connections even more. The kind that don't require constant maintenance, that don't come with expectations or guilt. I had an old friend I hadn't spoken to in a while. No drama, no falling out. We had just drifted. But one evening, out of the blue, she called me. Not because I hadn't reached out, not because she needed something, but just because she thought of me. And you know what? That conversation meant more to me than 100 forced interactions ever could. Because real relationships don't disappear when you take a step back. They don't demand your energy. They don't punish you for choosing yourself. And when you stop chasing what isn't meant for you, what is meant for you has a way of finding you. That's what I've learned in all of this. That life isn't about being surrounded by people all the time. It's about being surrounded by the right people. And sometimes That means having fewer of them. Sometimes that even means spending more time alone. And that's not something to be afraid of. That's something to cherish. The most surprising thing about this journey wasn't the solitude itself. It was how much I needed it, how much I had been craving it, without even realizing it. For so many years, I filled my life with obligations, conversations, and expectations that weren't truly mine. And now, every morning feels like it belongs to me again. It's funny, isn't it? We spend so much of our lives believing we need to be more available, more involved, more connected, when in reality, what we need most is space. Space to think, space to breathe, space to simply be. I used to think that stepping back meant losing something, that if I stopped keeping up, I'd fade into the background. But I see it differently now. I didn't lose anything that mattered. I let go of what didn't. And in that space, I found something I never expected: clarity. Not just about what I wanted, but about what I didn't want. The conversations that felt like a chore. The friendships that had become one-sided. The pressure to always be on. I started to see those things for what they really were: weight I no longer needed to carry. And here's the thing. Once you put that weight down, you don't pick it back up. You realize how much lighter life feels without it. Now, I find joy in the quiet moments, the kind most people rush past. The sound of rain against a window, the way the afternoon light softens the edges of everything, the first sip of coffee in the morning when the world is still asleep. These are the moments that matter, not because they're extraordinary, but because they're mine, because I'm finally present enough to notice them. Some might hear this and think it sounds lonely, but they'd be wrong, because loneliness isn't about being alone. It's about feeling disconnected. And for the first time in my life, I feel truly connected to myself, to my own time, to the things that actually matter, and maybe that's the real message here. You don't have to fill every space with people just to feel whole. You don't have to say yes out of guilt. You don't have to hold on to things just because you always have. Because at the end of the day, your time is yours. Your life is yours. And the most freeing thing you can do is choose how to spend it in a way that truly fulfills you. Maybe that means stepping back. Maybe that means letting go of things you once thought were essential. Or maybe it just means giving yourself permission to enjoy the quiet, to embrace stillness, to notice the beauty in the simplest things. Whatever it is for you, don't be afraid to choose it. If this resonates with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever felt the need to step away from the noise? Have you found joy in the simple moments? Share your experience in the comments. I think a lot of us are on this journey together, even if it doesn't always feel that way. And if you haven't yet, consider subscribing. There's so much more to explore about finding peace, embracing change, and creating a life that feels yours. Because no matter where you are in life, one thing will always be true. You don't need permission to choose yourself. And it's never too late to start.